This is the Barbaga Show. I find the world's most interesting people, and today I have one of them, Mark Skousen. I actually should call you Dr. Mark Skousen, right? Like, let's be formal. You've worked really hard to be a doctor, right? You should get the introduction.
Well, I should check your pulse first before you do that.
Exactly. So, Mark, you're one of the preeminent economists, and that's a very short way for a long biography of being in 77 countries, traveling the world, writing some of the most respected papers in economy and economists, running a newsletter, which has helped a lot of people get rich in the last 20 years. And my favorite, you work for the CIA and the federal government. Did I miss anything?
Well, yes, I got married and have 5 children.
Oh, that is super. That's important. I'm telling you, if you have 5 kids, you better learn about money.
That's for sure. Yeah,
now,
that's for sure. And especially to teach your children how to make their own money instead of depending on their parents, right?
Isn't that brilliant? I mean, we could spend the whole show talking about that. But let me ask you this question about you're a parent, you got kids, so you care about your household, you're the leader, and then you consult governments on running millions, if not billions of people to do what's best for them. Is there any connection with the economy of how you run a household and self-reliance and responsibility, self-initiation with running a household than running a country?
Yeah, I think there is some dangers as well, and you want to teach them self-respect and initiative to go out on their own and so forth. But when children are young, of course, they're dependent on their parents for their livelihood, for their education and so forth. And unfortunately, that's been translated too often to government saying, well, government is, you're all children, and therefore we have to take care of you, your food, your medical expenses, your retirement, and so forth. And that's a danger. We want to help those who need help, but we don't help those who don't need help, because if you do that, then you destroy their initiative. So at some point, when your children grow up, you teach them self-reliance and to go out and earn their own independent living and decide what they want to do in life, and that's really important. So it's a balancing act, for sure.
Isn't that sort of a great metaphor of, yes, you love your kids, and at some point you owe it to them to stop babying them. You owe it to them to let them fall and let them risk and let them, because if you don't, they'll be 35 in rehab and still asking you to pay the bill. I mean, we know hundreds of examples, including some sons of presidents that have had this problem. Like, how do you handle that from a like, what age do you go, okay, no more? 18 years old, I'm not helping you out. But we don't. We help them through college. I mean, I've got brothers and sisters that still get helped out with my dad. And I'm really great because he is sympathetic. He cares. At what point do you say no? And at what point does the government say no?
Well, Warren Buffett had a really good answer to that. He says, you want to give your children, if you're wealthy, you want to give your children enough to do something, but not enough to do nothing.
Oh, he's a wise man. Not enough to do nothing. Oh, I like that. I like that. I had this theory that, like, part of the reasons we have so many crazy problems is that we've been at peace for so long. A lot of the younger generation is making up problems, and they're creating things because they don't have like a huge mission to go on. I think if the war was at our doorstep, we wouldn't be squabbling over like what pronoun you give me. Do you have an opinion on why our younger people have just created diseases and conditions that didn't exist 50 years ago, or is it just that I'm too conservative in this observation?
Well, people do have peanut allergies that they never had before, that's for sure. But look, I teach at Chapman University here in Southern California to young people who are ambitious. They want to learn. They read. They don't just look. Which is a problem, but it kind of restores my faith in America that we have a lot of young people who are doing the right thing and want to be out on their own. We always have to reinvent ourselves, and the American dream has to be offered every generation. I think we do have cultural decline in so many ways. We have cultural decline in what we wear, in our demeanor, our language. I don't like the deterioration in our language that we have seen. Even on, I had to turn off Gutfeld the other day. It was just so foul, the language, and I know they bleep everything off, but I just think it's too bad that they feel in order to attract that kind of an audience, they have to use that kind of gutter language.
Yeah, George Carlin was famous for having a comedy bit about the 8 words you can't use in the FCC. And of course, this is 1973, and he was quite a prophet, even if you don't like him personally. And it's interesting because those words still might not be allowed on the American air because you had this government saying, hey, we don't want our people exposed to that. But then you had a counterculture, and including now everything's streaming, even this is mostly streamed on the internet. We don't have those barriers. So
Yeah.
is it a bad thing that we can cuss and we can tell these stories and we can promote these ideas? Or is it now everybody has their own TV station and now no one knows what's true?
You know, I use a method which is pretty effective in keeping people to use proper language. So whenever someone uses the F word to me, I stop them and I say, listen, would you ever use the N word in public? Oh, no, I wouldn't do that. And I said, well, that's how I feel about the F word. And it kind of stops them in their tracks. And in some ways, that the word is, in its meaning, is far more insulting than the N word.
Right.
And so it works for most situations. But I think it's tragic I have to bring this up all the time.
Well, first of all, I respect that you do that. And I'll give you a great story of one of my really close friends, is that if that's your boundaries, Mark, I'm going to do my best not to cuss. But I will ask you, don't go see one of my late night comedy shows. I don't think I can help it. And I'll tell you why. Like, as a comedian, you're like desperate to make them laugh. And sometimes those K words have the biggest punch. Oh, Mark's going to hate me. But when we're friends, I don't mind that. Like, if you ask me to call you a tomato, I'll refer to you as a tomato as a pronoun. But I do have a problem with you demanding that everyone in the planet have this sort of language. And I feel like everyone has a responsibility to say, hey, I'll be glad to call you what you want, and I'll be glad to avoid these terms when we're around each other, but you're not going to make it a law. Like, you're not the kind of guy saying, oh, I'm going to make it a law, because we did that for 100 years, and people, have black markets and underground liquor and hookers, and, you outlaw something, they'll find a way to do it.
It's really funny in that regard, because I've been reading this book called The Road to Freedom, by a Nobel Prize-winning economist, and he actually supported blue laws. You remember the old Sunday blue laws that prohibited you from doing business on Sunday?
I'm in Texas, and I don't think I can buy a hammer and a nail at the same time. At least that's the way it used to be. Is that we're talking about blue laws?
Yeah, the Sunday blue laws, which are closed, that you would restaurants would be closed. I mean, like Chick-fil-A. And but this would be by law, the Sunday Blue laws, and he was advocating it. Joe Stiglitz is the Nobel Prize-winning economist, and I said, Joe, he said, well, here's my argument: by everybody closing on Sunday, you have a lot more leisure time, and this is a really positive thing. Too many people are working on Sundays, and you don't get the leisure time. It was a pretty interesting argument, but I thought to myself, we are really going backwards if we're going to have Sunday closing.
Well, I'll tell you an interesting story. When I was living in Valley Village, I lived in the middle of a very Hasidic Jewish neighborhood. And they were super nice people, but it was very odd to me that they would come over and say, hey, I can't turn my own dryer off, but could you turn it off for me? Because it's against God's law. And we're like, okay, but I'm not going to tell anyone I'm touching your equipment. And so super sweet. But what I thought about is the benefit of that kind of really super conservative, don't use electricity, you have to walk to the synagogue. The benefit is that community was much tighter. They supported each other. They knew when people were sick. They brought bread over. There was a huge benefit to living that way, and I appreciated it. I thought, man, my freedom's a lot more, and I like to use a dryer on Friday night. I'm good without this, but I did respect it. But I also didn't believe that some guy 2,000 years ago said you can't use a washer and dryer 2,000 years from now. Like, to me, the logic didn't make sense. But like your argument, yeah, their life may be a little bit better, but aren't you compromising freedom to have a little bit more of this family connection, not being drunk on Sunday sort of thing?
It really is an interesting debate. And getting back to your thing on language, we actually have an adult comedy hour at our Freedom Fest conference. But we tell people in advance. In other words, actually for our general sessions, we tell people, please control your language, because we want everybody in the room to enjoy this conference and not having to get up and walk out and stuff like that. So we want to kind of maximize that. But on the individual breakout sessions, if somebody is like our comedy program, we'll call it adult, and people then know what they can expect to get. And so I think that's the solution to the problem, not that we ban everybody from whatever they want to do.
Yeah, let me back up in case you just joined us. Mark is the founder of a event called Freedom Fest. And 2 years ago, not only did we broadcast from Freedom Fest, but I performed on stage with John Cleese, and it was such an opportunity to hang out with John Cleese and perform. And I think it wasn't the clean show, but I wasn't super dirty. I think I probably got a solid B+ as far as offending people. But your event attracts, and this is I remember this joke, and it was just whatever the joke was. Half the people here did not laugh, and then the next look, they laughed. And what I said was, Freedom Fest is so interesting because you have conservative Christians here who'll never laugh at that joke, and you have women for prostitution here, which will always laugh at that joke. And they did. It was just like, and it was such a mixed crowd. And so people that are like, hey man, what would be a fun event to do? I recommend it. Not only I'll be there and you'll be there, but you've got a lineup of great speakers. And why would someone, because I wasn't political, Mark. I didn't perceive myself as highly one direction or another. But after I've been there a couple of years, and of course I'll be back this year, I'm excited about hearing political ideas. I'm excited about hearing people that you can list some of the names. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was there. There's all these great people, Mike Tremont. Is they had ideas that I was like, wow, that really applies to me because I'm an entrepreneur. I want freedom. I want freedom for my family. What do they have in store, and why did you create Freedom Fest as an event?
So I thought that we needed a kind of a Renaissance gathering where we talk philosophy, history, science and technology, healthy living, not just politics, investing. We have a film festival, the Anthem Film Festival that my wife does, which is very popular. We have a comedy show. We have a pitch tank, which is kind of like Shark Tank for entrepreneurs. So there's a little bit of everything, kind of a Renaissance gathering. And I always wanted to do this conference because so often I went in and somebody was speaking, it was boring, and I walked out, and I wanted a conference that I personally would never be bored at. And at Freedom Fest, you're never bored because we have like 10 breakout sessions. So you have something. Our biggest problem is you want to go to 2 or 3 sessions and you can't hear them all. We record everything, but it's on steroids, if you will. It's a conference on steroids.
Yeah, and I'll be there this year. If you're watching, freedomfest.com, that's the domain name. There's a discount code for our listeners called BART50. That'll get you discount on the thing. But the good news is, like, people can show up that have never really engaged because it's not so much a political seminar. I mean, I first thought it's a libertarian conference, but that's not my impression now, Mark. I feel like it's people who love freedom, who want to experience, they have different social issues. Some have very specific agendas, and some like me are just going like, wow, maybe I can learn something. What would you say the average avatar is that shows up and buys a ticket and spends a weekend with us?
Well, that's the problem. I don't think you can pinpoint an average. Everybody is so different. We always want to put people in categories, and really I think we treat people as, if we believe in individualism, let's treat everyone as an individual. And we don't know, everybody has a different experience. It's kind of like everybody at night feeling the elephant, and you feel different parts of the elephant, and you think, oh, this is a different animal, and it's really the same animal, just different aspects of it. Now we do have like actor, rapper Ice-T. We've got actor, comedian, director Rob Schneider. We have two the public intellectuals. We have from Harvard University, Steven Pinker, And
Very
then from the
popular author.
UK, we have Matt Ridley, who's the public intellectual from the UK. So both of them are going to be on a panel with, or a luncheon with Michael Shermer, asking them questions. I mean, it's really going to be quite exciting. And we have Kennedy, of course, as our from Fox News as our MC, like we've had before, and President Milei is planning to come. We hope that things will work out there. It's rather chaotic in Argentina right now, but he's on the list of speakers as well. Steve Forbes will be there. John Mackey, the former CEO of Whole Foods Markets, who has a new book out called The Whole Story, telling his personal account. Lots of book authors, and Michael Schellenberger is going to be there. The list just goes on and on. We have 200 speakers. I can't remember all of them.
Wow. And some, I mean, they speak, but they come off stage and people get autographs and talk to them. So it's not impossible. I don't know if I get to hang out with the president of Argentina, but I'm going to try.
Yeah. Well, Bart, one thing I will say is we don't have a green room. We don't normally have a green room. And so that's where speakers hide out and they watch the program. But you can sit next to Steve Forbes at a conference, at our conference. That's how open we are. And now some of them have security issues. Milei will have security issues, and we do have a presidential debate. Ours is the most democratic presidential debate because it's not going to be just two people like CNN and no public. We've invited all the third party as well as the major candidates. Now Trump will probably be in jail, so he can't make it, but
you got things to do, man. You can't. I have to say no to speaking events. I get why he can't do it. He's busy man. So your presidential debate with all the opinions. And is there a structure that makes this kind of equal time and fair time where people can actually talk about the issues?
Free and Equal Elections is a group that is organizing this. So we have representatives from the Green Party, Jill Stein. We have the Libertarian Party, who was just recently won that battle. We've invited RFK Jr. He came last year, as you know, to Memphis, so he may come again. But it will be 4 or 5 people on the stage that will be representing their views, and we're hopeful the Republicans and Democrats will show up, Biden and Trump, but they don't like to debate except to themselves, so that's probably not going to happen.
Let me ask you a political question, and then we'll get back to some economics. I'm fascinated. Guys, he literally is one of the economics, like he's their favorite. They read and pass around your literature in their classes. Like they love you in the university space. So I want to ask about that. But politically, in America, I have a lot of viewers that aren't in America. In fact, a lot of them are in India, and they have elections with 19 people running. And at the end of it, 7 or 8 got a lot of the similar votes. And maybe they win by 22%, and that's the person who gets to be the prime minister. Why is it so difficult to have more than 2 parties in the United States? It seems like such a logical, easy thing to figure out. Is that ever going to change, Mark? Or are we stuck with A, B, or if I vote for C, the guy I don't want wins? Like, how do we manage that as Americans?
The states are in charge on who gets on the ballot, and the Republicans and Democrats have worked hard to create that monopoly, dual system. Third parties do struggle. They can get on ballots and do get on ballots, but are very hit and miss in that regard. But yeah, you go to Venezuela or some other country and they have all of these. I like I don't know exactly what they call it, multiple voting, where you vote on people that you support and you can check more than one box saying, well, yeah, I like this guy, yeah, and I like this guy. And then they tabulate it, and whoever is the most popular, who gets the most checks, and it's weighted according to the top one to the bottom. A lot of times the person who may come in second or third is actually the most popular. And then you reduce it to 2 individuals, and then you have another vote for who's the president. But originally our Constitution had a situation where the person who came in first was president, the person who came in second was vice president.
Really?
They could be from different parties, and they were from different parties.
When
So
did that
that's
change? I'd never heard of this, and
yeah,
I've
that
studied a lot
changed
of
in
history.
the 19th century, where now it's from the same party. But I kind of like the idea of a mixed government in that respect, and you have to work with each other.
Work with each other. That seems to be a foreign.
Foreign
Speaking of
idea.
vocabulary, that seems kind of odd. That's true. You were mentioning vocabulary. Have you noticed, and this is much more social than political, that both parties take words and they redefine them, and then they make you wrong for using it like your granddad did? And I understand the big words, but like, what was the word that Trump? Patriot. Like Patriot Missile, Patriot Act. Now, if you're a patriot, you're a lunatic that storms the Capitol. Like they took the same word and redefined it. They're doing the same thing on the left with the word woman. The whole documentary, you can't define woman. Like, is that like an old political trick, or is that something we're just noticing because it's in our face with the whole gender pronoun issue?
Well, we do change words. Like pedophile used to be a love of children, right? And now it
It
has a very
it
different
definitely
meaning.
has a different connotation now. I would agree with you there.
Gay is not it's the homosexual connection.
Right.
There's lots of these examples that language changed, but I do think there's cultural decline, and I think there's lots of evidence of, in terms of everybody wearing tattoos and everybody using bad language. There's so that to the point where there is no such thing as bad language anymore. So those are cultural things, and the fact that people aren't reading like they used to, that they want a visual thing, they want to look, but they don't want to read. So those are the things that I am concerned about. We do have cultural decline, but we seem to go in cycles in that respect. And I mean, back in Roman days, there were all these writings about the decline of our youth and stuff like that. So you know that it goes in cycles, but something
Yeah,
that
I watched, and I hate to admit, I watched a TikTok video comparing the decline of Rome with the decline of America. And I don't know if any of it's factual, but it was fascinating because, like, wow, they had like hundreds of years of peace. And then they ate themselves from the inside, and, you know, things were rampant that were relatively like questionable morally. Whereas in a wartime, people are kind of all focused on the enemy. And so I was wondering, is there really a decline? Is it really debt is going to bring us all down? Is it really technology that's going to end us all? Or is it something as simple as AI is going to actually end up being the Terminator in 5 years? They're just going to come hunt us down?
yeah, about 10 years ago, we have a theme every year. This year, our theme is Brave New World, based on Aldous Huxley's book, Brave New World. And there's a lot of elements to that. But 10 years ago, we had one called Are We Rome? It was really a fun, and at Caesar's Palace, naturally. And but we had a big debate there, and a lot of people said, look at these similarities between Rome and America, and then there's others saying, no, we're very different, we're not going to collapse. And then we had another one on, are we facing, during the, when we had, what was it, the Tea Party movement back in 2011, we had a question, are we facing a new American Revolution or a French Revolution? And boy, that one was really fun to talk about the French Revolution, how it started off imitating the American Revolution, but ended much differently, much worse, ended up in dictatorship with Napoleon taking over and guillotining innocent people and all of that stuff. But I do think our legal system, I'm really worried about our legal system and what is being taught in law schools. And we're starting to see that now. I mean, this thing against Trump of converting a misdemeanor into a felony and stuff like that. And everybody looks through this except for the people who want to get Trump no matter what.
Right, yeah,
our legal
just on that
system is getting. We need major. We've had criminal reform, criminal justice reform, which I think overall has been good. But I do think that people, if you become a target, they can use the law to go after you and you can't get representation, and you can't get a judge that's really fair. And
Well,
we have kangaroo courts. We have Banana Republic kangaroo courts now.
you see it in the procedurals. They'll find someone they think is guilty, and they're like, "Hey, he broke a tail light. We got to keep him in jail." They'll stack on charges just to hold that guy without the evidence, and we see it all the time on our television. And then you got the situation with Trump. Whether you love him or hate him, he did one thing, and they divided it up into 11 checks, and now they have 34 counts. And that sounds like, oh my God, he did 34 different felonies. Right. And you're just like, oh my God, what if I get arrested and have no...
He's a convicted felon now, and he can't vote because of it.
It's amazing. Yeah, so again, not even Trump or not Trump, but the system does seem geared toward people with power. So the DA and the people who elect them, they're like, we want to go against gangsters this month. We want to go against prostitutes. This is our enemy this month. And that's a great example of it, of like somebody wanted to find something. What was it, the Franz Kafka book? I think I read it in college, and I was like, what the hell is this book about? Oh, I cussed. See, Mark, I'm telling you, I'm going to try and be better. What the heck is this about, Mark? This whole book, this guy didn't do anything. Yeah. And that's what the book was about.
Yeah.
If you ask enough questions, you'll find something you did wrong, I guess.
We often used to say the Democratic Party is the evil party and the Republican Party is the stupid party. Have you ever heard this?
No. How did I not hear this?
Now it's maybe the Democrats are acting really stupid right now because they're only reinforcing people's desire to vote for Trump. I mean, I thought I would never, ever vote for Trump. But I'm thinking about it now saying, well, he's getting so screwed by these people that you feel sorry for the guy.
Well, I don't feel sorry for him, but there's so much crazy on the other side of the aisle. I was like, I'm not sure. Just give you an example. I was listening to NPR, which I listen to all of them because I like to be as unbiased. And this woman that was teaching at Princeton or Stanford kept using the word person who births. And she was a doctor, and I kept saying, and then she'd go, yeah, well, then the mothers do this. I'm sorry, person who births. And I was like, am I in a different reality? Like, do you need to change that word? So let's assume that technology is so great that they can give a man a uterus, and that person's it's just a woman. Like, it's a man converted to a woman. Now that's the mom. Like, oh my God, I'm probably going to get canceled this conversation, Mark. I was just so confused that is a doctor in Stanford using that language. And I was like, oh my God, what are they teaching our 10-year-olds? That is why the left will probably continue to lose, because they're taking moderate people that are going, that doesn't make any sense. Like, since when can people who birth, I'm just lost. I thought I knew a little bit about biology, but apparently I don't.
Richard Dawkins has been very good on this. I mean, I'm not a fan of his attack on religion, but in the case of, he says it's binary. The science is binary, and stop trying to deny science. And people are, it actually fell out of, we've just gradually moved in this direction when, for all the reasons that we've seen with the law changes and stuff like that. So now we're into transgenderism, and it's ending badly. It really is. But there's a lot of things where it's like we're experimenting in something, and then we realize, oh, we're going down the wrong road here, and we need to reverse ourselves. And we're seeing that in finance as well, and in academic, the DEI or the DI or whatever you want to call it, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And of course, they're not doing that. They certainly don't believe diversity in the academic world, because you can't find hardly any Republicans at all who teach. But
so it's not diversity on beliefs, it's diversity on skin color.
Yeah.
Which isn't that what the whole 60s was about, to not discriminate on skin color?
Yeah, now they're doing it. So, in fact, what really irritates me is I can't read the New York Times anymore anytime they mention race, because they capitalize black and they lowercase white.
Really?
But I will tell you, and so they're clearly racist. I mean, the New York Times is racist. Who would ever think we could say that? But we can say that now. But what's really cool is The Economist, this is published in Britain, and I know the publisher, Daniel Franklin, and they refuse to do this. Everything is traditional lowercase. It's black and white or lowercase. And that's how they do it. And I admire their willingness to not be politically correct.
Well, they're just doing what traditional English books taught and not going.
Right.
Let me ask you an economic question, and I apologize for those of you listening that slept through economic class, but I actually find what you do fascinating. I read Adam Smith, The Wealth of Nations in college. I read, these philosophical books in the 1800s, the Thomas Paines of the world, and yet and it was hard. And what I left feeling was, I don't know what economy has to do with me. I'm a small business owner. At the time I was a student. Like, I'm never going to run for office. I'm never going to give $1 billion to a military complex. Like, you wrote a paper that was so concise, other economists are applauding you for it. And so how can you explain briefly why economist and why economy matters to me, the average guy, the average business owner?
Yeah, so I was commissioned by Michael Shermer, who is the publisher of Skeptic magazine, and he's coming. He's our resident scientist at Freedom Fest, and he commissioned me to write an article on give me the basics of economics in a few pages that you can sit down in one sitting and read and understand economics. So I wrote this paper called "The Economics of Life Made Simple." That's what it's called. And you can read it online on skeptic.com. Just put your name under the search. Just put my name in there and it'll pop up. But I got so many requests for this because it explained economics with the graphs and so on in a very simple fashion. I have a glossary and that sort of thing, all in 15 pages. And so I printed it up because I kept getting requests for copies, and you want to have a printed copy, not just go online and read it. So I printed up a couple thousand copies, and I gave it to a professor of accounting who told me, he says, "Mark, I've always tried to understand economics, so I read the book Economics for Dummies, still couldn't understand economics, but then I read your essay, Economics of Life Made Simple." And he said it just cleared up everything, because basically what I talked about was how do you personally become wealthy? How does a nation personally become prosperous? It's all the same thing. It's you live within your means, you save regularly, you invest the savings productively in a business or in the stock market, which is other people's businesses. And in a nation's the same thing. A nation needs to live within its means. It needs to encourage training and education, which we know is the sign of our success, because we go to school and we get educated in a skill, and we make money and we save money and we retire on it. And same thing with company or countries. Countries need to have a regular savings rate. You need to use that. You need to train and educate your people. You need to have a broader market. You need to encourage entrepreneurship, all of this sort of thing. Low taxes. Adam Smith had it all. He said, the key to going from the lowest barbarism to the highest level of prosperity is easy taxes, sound money, peace, easy taxes, sound money, and a tolerable administration of justice. Doesn't have to be perfect. Tolerable administration of justice. And you had that, you can become rich. So I printed up this thing, and if people go to I have a website where they can buy the printed copy. They can go to Skeptic magazine and read it online. But if they go to skousenbooks.com, that's Skousen, skousenbooks.com, they can buy any number of copies they want for $3 each. And it's just an eye-opener. lawyers in particular like this for some reason. One lawyer said, "This is the best brief in economics I've ever read."
Well, economics is confusing for people, and to
yeah.
boil it down to 15 pages is mind-boggling. But I want to again ask, and I think you just answered this question. The book I'm writing and that I've been writing this topic is Happy, Wealthy Mind. And so a lot of those 400 pages are what actions can we take, either lower or middle class people, and become wealthier and happier. You hit on some of the things I've talked
for you to do this.
You did 15. I took 400. I'm really slow, Mark. I'm a lot slower than you. But think about it. Like, obviously, saving money, delayed gratification, those are really boring things, Mark. No one wants to do that. It's not fun. Like, make money, save money, get a job, go to school. Like, that's not very sexy.
Yeah, it does remind me of C.S. Lewis once, who said, "Here's what life is all about: school, play, school, play, school, play, work, 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 work till you die." But here's the key. Here's the key, Bart. If you are successful in this mundane, money-grabbing business, it gives you the free time, the leisure time to break away, just like Ben Franklin. I'm working on a book right now on Ben Franklin for the 250th anniversary of our country, because he's the most fascinating of the founding fathers, because he was a businessman who was very successful. And then at age 42, he retired. And what did he do? He didn't just play golf and just have his money bin, counting his money. He started engaging in civic activities, science, electricity, experiments in that regard. He became a diplomat. He became a world traveler. He did all of these wonderful things because he became financially independent and would have that freedom to walk away and do other things, and supported great causes. I mean, he was involved with the first university, the first library, the first hospital.
But all that came after he became financially independent.
All of it came afterwards.
Yeah, I call that the golden goose. Like, if you can get that few real estate properties, Arnold Schwarzenegger only became a movie star because he had $1 million in real estate. And he could now go to the gym every day, go to auditions. He could afford to say no to bad movie roles because he'd already been a millionaire. And like, maybe we're too old to start now with that idea, but isn't that kind of the whole purpose of business in a country like America, to give yourself the freedom to say, look, you can go make all the money you want, then you can spend the rest of your life making a difference, making art. Is that what Freedom Fest is about? Like, how do you live free?
I tell people when they come to Freedom Fest, how is it that you're here? How is it that you have the freedom to break away from your everyday job and do this? It's because you're all been successful, one level or another in your business, whether it's working for someone else. You have that freedom. But I will tell you, my wife had a very interesting panel one time, and with these filmmakers, and this one filmmaker was from Australia, a young guy, and he had produced a film that Joanne approved. It was a pretty good film, and so they had this discussion of freedom, and he said, "Let me tell you something, my government gave me freedom." Well, how's that? And he said, "Well, they have a very generous welfare program for us young people, so I had the free time, because since they paid my basic expenses, I had the free time to make this movie." And Wayne Allen Root was there, and he just exploded. He was so furious about the whole thing. But it was an interesting perspective that this guy had about the freedom to do this. But I do like the idea that you earned your own freedom instead of the government providing you the freedom.
Well, I think it goes back to the whole kind of like the win a lottery winner or the trust fund babies. It is true at 21, if you're Paris Hilton and have the freedom to become a star and to make music, like, people can create wonderful things because your parents have a bag of money. But a lot of those kids don't go career. They don't make films. They end up going drugs and down a different road, end up basically because they didn't earn it. It's when my dad never gave us like excessive amount of things. Like, here's an old car. you got a car, but you're not getting a Cadillac, right? Like he was very clear on saying you need to sort of earn your own stripes because when I'm gone, you can survive yourself. And it goes back to the very first of this conversation, like how do you be a good parent? The government essentially is saying, look, we got all these people. How do we make the best decisions? And that's the fight. That's the fight with every bill is where should we spend daddy's money?
I really think that one of the great tragedies is our welfare system because it is encouraging. We have 3 or 4 generations of people on welfare, and that's just not right. I do love the idea of the Welfare Reform Act that Bill Clinton signed into law with the Republican help, and that was basically after 5 years, if you're able-bodied, the welfare ends. And it was interesting when they 5 years came up and it was approaching the 5th year, suddenly those people were looking for jobs. And this is the only time in the history of food stamps and Medicaid that actually the number of people on food stamps and Medicaid declined on the federal level. And it only lasted for like 8 years because then what's his name? George W. Bush came along with the prescription drug bills and the financial crisis, and they kind of threw the Welfare Reform Act out. But they ought to bring it back. It was very controversial when it passed, and it proved to be so successful, they really need to bring that back.
Yeah, that the problem is if you're the politician saying let's end welfare, you look uncompassionate, and then you get voted out of office.
No,
so the mere
that.
appearance of too much
You're not
compassion.
doing that. What you're saying is, and people are sympathetic to this, if after you have 5 years to get your act together, and we're going to continue your welfare payments, but after 5 years, if you're able-bodied, you better get prepared to be on your own. And it really, that resonates with people. Nobody's going to complain about that, or very few people.
That's awesome. This has been great. Do you have, because markskousen.com is your personal website. You find the article. Right. Yeah, freedomfest.com is where they can sign up and come hang out with us and all those celebrities every year, basically. It's in Vegas in 2024, but it changes locations a little bit. Discount code is BART50. That gets you $50. But the sooner you register, it probably saves you money, right?
Absolutely, because on July 1st, it's going up to the full price, which is like $600, and this one's under $500, and with the discount, you get it even $50 off of that. So it's definitely time to sign up. And I'll tell you what's really exciting about this is not only are the speakers dynamic and new and exciting and know what they're talking about and aren't extremists, nutcases, and there's a lot of kooks out there. We try to minimize that at Freedom Fest, even though it's a libertarian conference. And people walk away with, I mean, I've had people, testimonials are just incredible. Like when John Mackey gives his whole food diet, we've had people come up and tell John, he said, you changed my life. I was overweight, I felt terrible, and now I'm dynamic and everything because of your whole foods diet that I followed. And it's just a remarkable feeling, and we've had people who have become millionaires as a result of recommendations at Freedom Fest. There's some people who have lost money, of course. That's the risk you take.
It is in Vegas. Somebody's going to lose money if you host it in Vegas.
That's right. You may take that money and go on the gambling table, especially if you won it in the lottery.
All right, Mark, you are now officially one of the world's most interesting people.
Well, and you're one of the better interviewers because we actually had a conversation and not just, here's the question, here's the answer, which you typically get. I mean, I've been on CNBC. I was a weekly commentator on CNBC and stuff like that. And it was all scripted, you know.
Well, thank you. I hope you tell all your very interesting friends to come over and see me at the show because we want to interview all the most interesting people. But thank you for the compliment. I appreciate it.
All right. My pleasure, Bart.
Mark Skousen, everybody. Thanks, buddy. Bye-bye.
All right. Take care.
Okay, we're back. Before we get back to the interview, Mark, I want to know, what's a libertarian? Like, I think I know, but I sure didn't know till I got there. Can you define that for people that may not know? Republican, Democrat, what's this thing called libertarian?
So I see the libertarians as kind of those who favor maximum liberty within the rule of law and within a robust competitive economy or model, if you will, maximum liberty. So it reminds me of Adam Smith, who argued that there are three elements to a libertarian society, which he called the system of natural liberty. And it had to be the rule of law, so you know the rules of the game, and you have a robust competitive model so that people can do what they want to do. And within that framework, you have maximum liberty to choose what your occupation is, what prices you want to charge, your relationship with suppliers and workers and so on, maximum liberty in that regard. So we don't believe in wage price controls, the government telling us what to do. They can establish basic principles of justice and bankruptcy law and that sort of thing. But constantly let us choose what we want to do in life. And where we want to live.
So what I heard is libertarians believe that the government has limited role, and we're smart enough to figure out our own little economies in our town. And we call that libertarian because freedom is first, and what we want to do, we're smart enough to do it. Did I hear that right, or feel like I'm missing something?
It's like Adam Smith. Adam Smith said, he didn't call it the system of social justice. He didn't call it the system of equality. He called it the system of natural liberty. So liberty or freedom is the highest ideal. And the other things fall out of place if you properly set up this system of natural liberty.
But someone listening to this will say, of course I want that. Everyone's a libertarian, but then they vote in a dictator because their friends are getting murdered. Then they vote in Hitler because they're starving. Like everyone says on paper, I want that. I want freedom. But why aren't people willing to take that action to actually vote people in that believe that you're smart enough to make your own decisions?
Yeah, it does take a certain amount of faith in your own abilities. I have two books on my bookshelf. One is by Milton Friedman, and it's called Free to Choose. And it's an optimistic view. If you choose freedom, you'll probably make the right choices. Well, there's a book right next to it by John Romer, a Marxist that teaches at Yale University, unfortunately. And his book is called Free to Lose. So What does that mean? That means if you choose freedom, you're going to lose, or a lot of people are going to lose. If you have the freedom to use any kind of drugs, you're going to overdose. If you have the freedom to drink, you're going to be an alcoholic. If you have the freedom to run a business, you're going to go bankrupt. You follow me? So
because he's a Marxist,
an element of faith in your ability to succeed when you have that freedom, which is risky. You're willing to take the risk, and that's what libertarians are. And a lot of people are into security. They want security over liberty. And Ben Franklin warned that people who choose security over liberty deserve neither. That's what he said.
He's a funny guy. So that's amazing, because people that are socialists or communists are consistently saying, I think someone else should be in charge of me because my neighbors are idiots, and I just want safety and security, even though I may not have enough to. That is amazing. So that's a great definition of libertarian. And of course, it's become such a political word because it's also a party opposed to a concept. So it's a little bit of both.
Yeah.
Cool. We'll be right back from the Bart Show. Don't go away. Yeah. You've been great, man. Thank you so much. I look forward to hanging out with you, and send all those famous people over to get interviewed for me. I think it'd be a blast. Ice-T is top of my list.
Your responsibility.
Hey, if you give me their number, I'll get them. I've been asking your people, how get Ice-T's email?
Send me an email on who you're interested in.
You got a deal.
I'll connect people.
I would love that. Okay, we will get this cut up and sent out as soon as the next couple of weeks, as soon as our team does it. And we'll get you some people there. And I'll see you in July.
Okay.